I expected a medal for rescuing the princess from pirates. Instead, the queen announced I was marrying her daughter. The door locked behind me, and I realized my comfortable guest quarters were actually a very nice prison cell. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison ran his hand through his short brown hair as he walked down the ship's gangway towards the docking bay. His thoughts raced back to that fateful mission when he had no idea what lay ahead. The docking platform was bustling with activity, and as soon as their craft touched down on the Royal Space Station of Vel'Kari Prime, a waiting honor guard fell into step beside him. They escorted Jake through the corridors until they arrived in front of an imposing double door guarded by two heavily armed guards. The leader nodded at them to enter. Inside, hundreds of noble figures from across their allied worlds filled the throne room, murmuring among themselves and eyeing Jake curiously as he followed his escort up the steps towards Queen Veyra's golden-trimmed dais. The queen sat regally on her silver-tiled throne, her white hair cascading down to her waist. Her eyes were like frozen stars, cold yet piercing. Beside her stood Princess Thessara Vel'Kari, a woman of striking contrast with dark silvery skin and defiant violet eyes. The princess took an anxious step forward as she was reunited with her mother. Queen Veyra's voice echoed through the room when she spoke. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, you saved my daughter from pirates." Jake bowed formally. "Serving the Alliance was reward enough, Your Majesty," he replied, his voice steady, but inwardly questioning everything that had transpired. The queen continued without pause, her tone unyielding and formal. "Nevertheless, I offer you my daughter's hand in marriage. The wedding will be held in 1 month's time." Hushed whispers broke out across the assembly as they processed this unexpected announcement. Jake looked at Princess Thessara, who was standing rigidly beside her mother, her dark hair falling over her shoulders and hiding a look of horror on her face. Their eyes met momentarily, neither wondered what was happening. Princess Thessara stepped forward hesitantly, but still managed to bow gracefully towards the queen despite her clearly troubled state. Her voice quavered slightly as she said, "Mother, this is too sudden." The queen's icy gaze turned toward her daughter, and it silenced any further protest. "Preparations will begin immediately," Veyra commanded with authority before turning back to Jake. "Escort Commander Morrison to his quarters." Jake was enveloped by the honor guard, who led him out of the room as soon as he tried to argue once more, stopping short only when Queen Veyra silenced him with a raised hand. The princess watched silently as her betrothed to be left. Her hands trembled slightly. Her mother's next words confirmed everything she had been dreading. "Disappointment will not be tolerated," the queen said coldly to Thessara, who nodded stiffly in agreement and turned away from the throne room doors that closed behind Jake with a heavy thud. The corridor was lined with statues of Vel'Kari nobles frozen in their most formal attire. The walls glowed faint blue, giving an ethereal quality to everything within sight. As they led him through this alien maze, every step brought them closer towards what seemed like increasing isolation. Finally reaching the end of his walk, a single door stood before Jake with a guard posted outside, and he realized these weren't just guest quarters, but rather a meticulously designed cell instead. The momentary pause as he was left alone inside gave way to the realization that there would be no quick escape, only compliance and waiting out what could never feel like anything less than a sentence served. The luxurious furnishings did little to ease his discomfort. Soft pillows, polished wooden floors, even an ornate vanity with everything one might need for personal grooming lay within, but none of it was comforting anymore. Sinking onto the bed, which, despite its comfort, felt cold and unwelcoming, Jake's mind whirled uncontrollably. His breath hitched as he tried to make sense of what had transpired, but there were no clear answers here among these alien walls. What could have been a simple act of heroism now loomed over him like an unyielding fate. For all intents and purposes, Princess Thessara was also trapped in her own way, both finding themselves bound by ancient laws they couldn't change or escape from. Yet there was something about the princess's gaze that hinted at more than just duty. When she looked at Jake during their brief encounter, slightest flicker of curiosity mixed with confusion. In this moment, all he could do was sit and wonder how exactly things had spiraled so out of control in such a short time. The morning after his announcement, Jake woke to the oppressive silence of his quarters. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to dispel the fatigue and confusion that clung to him like static cling. The Vel'Kari monarchy's rigid rules had already begun to weigh on his nervous. Each stone wall in this alien castle seemed an inch closer than before. Just as Jake was starting to pace around the room, searching for a distraction from the impending doom of marriage, he heard the door slide open without warning. He whirled toward it and came face to face with Princess Thessara Vel'Kari herself. She stormed into his quarters like an angry gale wind, her dark hair whipping behind her as she marched past him. "You," she seethed, her violet eyes alight with a mix of fury and betrayal. "You ruined everything." Jake felt the cold dread settle in his gut as he realized this was going to be worse than he had imagined. He took an involuntary step back, but her intensity didn't falter. "I was betrothed to Duke Krath," she continued vehemently. "We had plans, an alliance that would have secured my world's future, and now I am forced to marry a human I do not even know." He swallowed hard before responding with the calm voice he'd perfected through years of military training. "I did not ask for this, Your Highness. I saved your life because you were going to die, not for reward." Princess Thessara's tirade faltered at his words. She hadn't expected any humility or selflessness from a human stranger in her position. He held out an open hand, as if inviting her closer, but instead of moving toward him, she stood rigidly across the room. "I want out of this as much as you do," Jake continued resolutely. "I do not want a forced marriage to anyone." Her expression softened minutely, but only for a moment before steeling itself once more against any weakness. She glared at him suspiciously, and then asked sharply, "You would reject a princess?" This time, he did not hesitate. "I would reject any forced marriage," Jake said firmly. "Consent matters where I come from." The room fell silent again except for the faint hum of alien technology around them. He watched as she processed his words carefully, her eyes flickering between hard and thoughtful. Then Thessara sat down across from him, her posture stiff, but no longer quite so defiant. "There might be a way," she murmured finally, almost to herself. "Ancient laws have exceptions, loopholes." Jake nodded eagerly in agreement, relieved that there was still hope for escape, even if it meant navigating Vel'Kari legal traditions. He believed her when she spoke about the possibility of loopholes, because someone who knew these rules would likely know how to find a way out. "We'll work together," he offered with genuine intent, and not just empty words. "Until we are both free." She extended one slender hand toward him, palm up in an unfamiliar gesture that seemed almost symbolic between them, no strangers bound by circumstance yet united against it. He took her proffered hand carefully, his skin tingling at the cold touch of hers. "Partners," Jake affirmed solemnly, with a nod towards their unspoken agreement to find liberation together rather than fall prey to tradition alone. Her lips quirked upward in something resembling amusement, but did not quite reach a true smile. "Do not make me regret this, human." They worked meticulously over the next few days, meeting surreptitiously whenever possible, usually late into the night, when the rest of their household slept off duty. In one such session, deep within her library, a room filled with towering stacks of datapads and ancient scrolls that could be centuries old, they were engrossed in deciphering Vel'Kari law. Thessara patiently tutored him through Vel'Kari legalese, though Jake found it frustrating to navigate at first. She was surprisingly smart and strategic. Once she stopped being hostile, he began to appreciate her intelligence more as they delved deeper into their research together. Each new page turned brought them closer, but also left them both anxious over whether these ancient laws could truly offer an escape route. One night, exhausted from poring over countless texts by candlelight, Princess Thessara yawned and leaned against the stack of books she had just finished reviewing. Jake's hand reached out to help her stand, but instead he inadvertently steadied her shoulders before realizing too late that she was on the verge of nodding off. "I'm so sorry," whispered Thessara softly, as her violet eyes fluttered shut involuntarily. She allowed herself to sink slowly into him, until finally resting against his shoulder, a physical vulnerability in stark contrast with earlier hostility toward a human stranger who had saved her life, and then bound her future within it unexpectedly. Jake's heart thumped uncomfortably loud, but he didn't move, not even when she sighed softly, after settling fully asleep on him. He sat there quietly, in the dimly lit library, eyes shifting from ancient law texts to Thessara's sleeping form beside him, his mind racing through all that had happened between them so far. As dawn crept closer, and her breathing slowed into a peaceful rhythm against his side, Jake's resolve began to shift subtly. He realized something deeply uncomfortable as he waited for the princess to wake up again. The urgency of escaping their forced engagement was slowly diminishing with each day they worked together closely. This complicated situation was becoming more than just an unwanted duty imposed by Vel'Kari law. It felt like a partnership, and that had started out purely practical, but might have grown into something else if he let himself consider it. Jake carefully shifted Thessara onto the cushioned chair beside them, ensuring she wouldn't wake up as her head rested against the plush material comfortably. He then rose silently from where they'd been sitting, and made sure to leave behind a note for when she woke, urging patience, but also promising persistence in their quest for freedom. As he slipped out of those quarters under cover of shadow, Jake couldn't shake off this newfound uncertainty within him any more than Thessara could sleep away the exhaustion from endless research. Both were caught between duty and desire. Both were navigating uncharted waters where traditions clashed with personal choices. And somewhere in that twilight zone, they had become something neither fully understood yet. The corridors stretched silent ahead of Jake as he walked back toward his own quarters to rest for another day's battle against Vel'Kari law. His mind a whirlwind now of all the complex emotions stirring inside him alongside those uncharted possibilities. The Vel'Kari court buzzed like a hive on edge, whispers floating through the air as everyone waited for something to happen, a scandalous event that would shake the rigid foundations of their society. Duke Crathvel sat in his usual place at the side of the room, eyes glinting with malevolent satisfaction. His plan had been set into motion precisely, and he was confident nothing could stop him now. Jake found himself summoned to appear before the entire court early one morning. He arrived dressed formally yet uncomfortably, aware that every eye was upon him as he approached Queen Veyra's throne room. The announcement came swiftly from a court official, clear and unyielding. Duke Crathvel challenges Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison to an honor duel. Crath stepped forward, his demeanor smug, but also filled with barely contained aggression. "I demand this engagement be resolved once and for all," he declared loudly enough that the crowd hushed instantly. Jake's heart clenched painfully in his chest at these words, but he maintained a stoic composure as tradition demanded it of him. "I accept your challenge." Veyra's eyes flickered between them both. She could do nothing to interfere with this ancient law, and so her gaze was passive, icy silver, reflecting none of the turmoil that surely swirled within Jake's mind at such a prospect. Thessara stood nearby in silence, but visibly bristling against this turn of events. She exchanged glances sharply with Jake from where she had been standing behind her mother's side, worry etched into every line on her face now instead of just the usual defiant scowl. She could not prevent what was to come next, so when Jake left immediately thereafter toward preparations for the duel, a stark reminder that despite their efforts thus far, escape still remained impossible. She turned and fled back towards her chambers in frustration. Later that evening, as darkness fell, Thessara made a decision. She couldn't stand idly by while someone fought against Crath, just to preserve what little honor they had left between them, if only for another day or two more before the actual wedding could be delayed yet again. Her room was filled with various trinkets and decorations that betrayed her secret desire to live as an ordinary person rather than a princess, a stark contrast from her usual stoic demeanor. Thessara knew Jake would do everything he possibly could not to shame her, but she couldn't bear the thought of him dying over something so trivial. She hurried out of her quarters without another moment's delay, making for Jake's room down several hallways and through a few corridors until she reached his door. She knocked quietly on it in hopes that he wouldn't reject her before anything happened at all. "Jake?" Thessara asked softly when no immediate answer came back to her knock. The latch turned almost immediately upon the sound of her voice, revealing Jake standing inside with a grim set expression, but open posture, welcoming whoever may have been calling him this late in night. "Princess," he greeted cautiously, though kindly nonetheless. Thessara slipped inside without further delay once she saw his face, and it wasn't long before they were speaking almost as if old friends instead of two individuals bound together by circumstances outside their control. "I must beg your time, Commander Morrison," Thessara began formally, but quickly moved on to more personal matters once entering closer. "Duke Crathvel does not think twice about taking lives in pursuit of his goals. What little honor he has left lies only within the arena tomorrow morning." "Is there anything I can do?" Jake asked, concern evident from both worry and respect. She shook her head slowly, looking down at the floor. "You will fight with every ounce of skill you have, but Duke Crath is much more practiced." Thessara finally looked back up to meet his gaze fully once again. "And he believes a Vel'Kari life isn't worth one human's." Jake placed a hand gently on her shoulder, trying not to startle the young woman who had come so far from where she first began, cold and aloof, but now full of real fear for him. "You could die tomorrow," Thessara whispered finally, almost inaudible over the quiet hum of the room around them. Jake's mouth curved into a tired yet reassuring smile. Despite himself, perhaps one day they might be able to escape all this somehow. Couldn't guarantee it, but he would try until his last breath, if necessary. "I already risked my life for you once when those pirates attacked," he reminded her softly. Instead, she stared at him blankly, violet eyes wide and shimmering faintly with unshed tears that were very real indeed, not courtly performance or false bravado designed to mask inner turmoil, but actual emotional distress manifesting before his very eyes. "You would die for my honor, even though we are not." She struggled a moment more over words. "We barely know each other." "Is that so?" he asked back gently, genuinely curious rather than dismissive or mocking her sentiment. Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if acknowledging how strange and yet oddly fitting such thoughts felt to both of them. "I don't know what it means," but Thessara confessed quietly before looking away again awkwardly under his steady gaze that seemed almost searching now instead of the usual professional distance they maintained for politeness' sake. Jake nodded thoughtfully, not pushing any further, since he knew she was already far past where either would have expected themselves to be, considering all previous obstacles and boundaries laid between them. "Then perhaps we can figure it out together," he offered with a tentative smile, despite knowing tomorrow could change everything once again under these unyielding traditions. The next morning dawned bright but cold, the arena bustling early, as spectators arrived eagerly for what promised to be an explosive event unlike any other in recent memory among their people. Duke Crath strutted confidently towards his station, while Jake was escorted inside more solemnly by palace guards, both men ready yet wary, given very different perspectives on this confrontation. As soon as they were all properly positioned and rules clearly laid out, the fight commenced. From the outset, it became abundantly clear that Crath vastly outweighed any hope Jake might have for victory. Under such conditions was faster, stronger, far better trained in every conceivable way a formal duel could demand from its participants. Blood trickled down Jake's face soon enough, but despite taking heavy hits again and again over multiple exchanges, he managed to somehow stay upright through sheer force of will alone. The audience murmured amongst themselves, watching with growing fascination as the human soldier refused to back down, even when it became clear he would lose, instead opting for a prolonged struggle that defied expectations placed on such an outsider. Krath finally began showing signs of weariness toward mid-fight, however, losing some measure of his usual control over each swing and parry exchanged between him and Jake. It was at this moment Thessara herself rose from amongst the crowd, looking directly towards where she knew he stood, no longer just a royal figurehead, but rather someone who had come to genuinely care about her future. "I invoke the right of personal honor," she declared loudly above all other sounds filling the arena presently, voice ringing out crisp and clear over even amplified speaker systems, as per Vel'Kari custom during such occasions. Silence fell immediately. In wake thereof none dared contradict a princess invoking something so sacred yet unspoken since time immemorial. Veyra herself could only nod once. It became apparent how this would change everything, despite all efforts previously aimed at preventing exactly this outcome from materializing before them, now undeniable and irrevocable. Thessara approached the edge of combat zone, eyes sharp but determined as she took Jake's discarded weapon in hand, having secretly trained diligently for years behind the grand hall of Vel'Kari Palace, was brimming with anticipation as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood nervously at the altar, his body bearing visible signs of recent battles, bruises mottled across his skin, and bandages on various cuts and abrasions. Despite these injuries, a small smile played on his lips, a testament to how much things had changed since he first arrived in this alien world as a reluctant hero. Princess Thessara Vel'Kari walked towards him with an air of defiance rather than submission. Gone was the cold aloofness she once exuded. Now there were hints of warmth and determination, her dark hair cascading down to frame her face, eyes locked firmly on Jake's blue ones as they met halfway across the aisle. The queen watched silently from above, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She had expected resistance, but what she saw was something different. Their daughter's happiness radiated through every step Thessara took towards her future husband. Jake cleared his throat and addressed the assembled crowd in a solemn yet steady voice. "I came here as a prisoner bound by tradition. I leave today not just as your commander-in-chief's envoy, but as an equal partner chosen freely. Though I did not choose this law, I now stand before you to pledge my devotion willingly." Thessara's violet eyes softened further at his words. She returned the vow with her own voice, strong and clear. "I arrived here seeking only to uphold honor by force. Yet in fighting back against tradition's weight, Jake has shown me patience when faced with hostility, respect where others might have seen nothing worth saving. He chose me not because he had to, but out of genuine will." Their vows were marked by a profound shift from Vel'Kari traditions, speaking volumes about the new path they embarked upon together under their own accord rather than merely abiding societal rules. The ceremony concluded with applause echoing throughout the hall as Jake and Thessara shared a kiss that spoke more eloquently of mutual understanding and commitment than any word ever could. Even Veyra allowed herself to be seen smiling faintly, a rare occurrence reflecting how far this human officer had come in winning over not just her daughter, but also the queen's respect. That night, as they lay together in their shared quarters for newlyweds, Thessara's hand traced gently over Jake's injuries with a mixture of tenderness and worry. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly, into the quietude that followed day-long festivities. Jake turned towards her on his side, holding her close. His gaze was steady as he answered, "No regrets. I rescued your mother from pirates, met a princess who believed herself bound by ancient laws more than anything else, faced down a duke to defend my honoriers too. And now here we are." She laughed softly despite the serious undertones of his words, a rare sound between them that spoke volumes about their growing bond beyond duty and tradition. "I hit you half to death," she joked, her hand tapping lightly on one spot near where Bruiser had attacked him harshly during training bouts leading up to Krath's duel. Jake caught her wrist midair playfully before kissing the palm tenderly back into place between them. "You love it." Her heart swelled in that moment. She really did, more than she could ever admit freely, even now. Years later, when their children asked how they met amidst tales of adventures and battles fought together as a unit, Jake always smiled fondly, recounting those early days where he had come to see Thessara not just as an alien princess, but also someone worth protecting fiercely and fighting for equally hard. "I rescued your mother from pirates," he would start simply. Thessara's voice would take over next with equal conviction, then, "I rescued him from a duel." Their eyes met across those childhood questions, both silently confirming what they already knew without needing to say aloud. Jake had been there when she needed rescue most urgently. Thessara returned the favor in kind, and together ever since, they continued rescuing one another through countless trials and triumphs alike. The children looked back at their parents, confused by this exchange, but knowing exactly what it meant for them both. No matter how daunting challenges became, Jake Morrison would always stand beside Princess Thessara Vel'Kari as equal partners in every sense of the word.